One half I, 32M, have lived in my three-bedroom Victorian in a nice pocket of Chicago for 6 years. I bought this place with a massive inheritance and a decade of grinding double shifts in industrial logistics. My wife, 30F, moved in 3 years ago when we got married. She hasn't put a single cent into the mortgage, property taxes, or the $40,000 I spent remodeling the kitchen. Her entire paycheck goes to her lifestyle, designer bags, a leased Lexus, and these spiritual retreats she goes on. The shift started about 6 months ago. Suddenly, I was stagnant and low vibration. She started hanging out with this guy she calls her soul architect, 35M. She told me they were just exploring higher consciousness together.
Right.
2 nights ago, I was sitting on the sofa making a grocery list. She was sprawled on the other end, her phone tilted, so I could see her literally swiping through Tinder. She wasn't even trying to hide it. "I've been thinking," she said, not looking up from a guy's profile. "The traditional marriage structure is a cage. I think we should see other people. But, logically, it makes sense to still live together. The housing market sucks, and I love this neighborhood. We're best friends, right? We can just be roommates who happen to be married on paper." She looked at me with this look of supreme entitlement. She wasn't asking. She was telling me that I was going to keep paying the bills while she brought soul architects into the house I built. "Interesting idea," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. "I'm glad you're being mature about this," she muttered, already back to swiping. "I'm going out tomorrow night, so don't wait up." The second she left for work the next morning, I went into beast mode. In Illinois, if a property is inherited before marriage and kept in a separate account, it's non-marital property. I'd kept everything, the deed, the mortgage, the utility accounts, strictly in my name, paid from my premarital inheritance account. I called a staging and moving company I knew through work. By 2 p.m., the house was gutted. I took every single thing I paid for, the $8,000 Italian leather sectional, the dining set, the 75-inch TV, the rugs, and even the high-end espresso machine. I left her with her clothes, her vanity, and a $50 twin-sized mattress I grabbed from a thrift store. Then I taped a roommate wanted sign to the front window. Underneath, I wrote, $1,800 per MO plus half utilities. No pets. No soul architects. I spent the afternoon with my lawyer. Since she'd declared her intent to end the marriage consortium, I had the legal separation and a formal eviction notice ready. In my state, you can't just toss a spouse out, but you can definitely start the process of charging them rent if the property is non-marital and the marriage has effectively ended. At 6:30 p.m., she pulled into the driveway. She walked in and stopped dead. She looked at the sign, then at the empty, echoing living room. "What is this?" she screamed. "Where's the furniture? Were we robbed?" "No," I said, sitting in a folding lawn chair in the middle of the room, sipping a beer. "We're seeing other people, remember? This is a roommate situation now. Since I own the house and everything in it, I decided to downsize. I don't need a 4-person sectional for a roommate. I'm listing the other bedrooms tonight. You can't do this. I live here." Actually, I handed her a folder. "This is an invoice for your half of the fair market rent. Since you want the freedom of being single, you get the responsibility of being single. You have 30 days to sign a lease or find a new architect to house you." She didn't call the police. She called the soul architect. 20 minutes later, this guy in a linen shirt and white sneakers struts into my house like he owns it. "Look, man," he said to me with this enlightened condescension. "I get that you're vibrating at a lower frequency because of the ego death of your marriage. But you can't manifest negativity like this. This is her space." I stood up. I'm 6 feet 2 inches and move freight for a living. He was about 5 feet 9 inches and looked like he'd struggle with a bag of groceries. Vibrations aside, I said, "You're trespassing. This is a private residence and I didn't invite you. Get out." "I invited him," my wife screamed. "As a roommate, you have the right to guests in your room," I said, pointing to the tiny guest room where I'd put the twin mattress. "But the common areas are mine. If he stays past 10 p.m., I'm calling the cops for a domestic disturbance. And since there's no furniture for him to sit on, Maybe go find a hotel. They left, but the next morning, I woke up to a locksmith at the door. She'd hired him to change the locks while I was in the shower. I walked out in a towel and showed the guy my deed and ID. I told him I'd sue his company for facilitating a break-in. He charged her $150 and bounced. Then came her mother, calling me a financial abuser and threatening an emergency injunction. I told her that her daughter ended the marriage while sitting on my furniture, so the furniture went into storage. By noon, I had 2 guys I'd found on a roommate app show up. They were 2 massive offensive linemen from the local university. They needed a place for the semester. When they walked in with their duffel bags, my wife's legal consultant friend she'd brought over looked like he wanted to jump out the window. "Who are they?" she demanded. "The new roommates," I said. "They're moving into the master suite and the second bedroom. I'm moving into the finished basement." "The master suite? That's my room." "Actually, the lease they just signed specifies the master. Your stuff is in the guest room. Since you haven't signed a lease or paid rent, you don't have a designated room. I gave you the one with the twin mattress because I'm nice." One of the guys, Big Mike, looked at her. "Is she the roommate? Does she have a problem? Because we need to get our lifting racks in the garage." "My Lexus is in there," she gasped. "Not for long," I said. "The garage wasn't part of your roommate deal. These guys paid for it. Your Lexus is currently being towed for blocking the driveway." She ran outside, screaming at the tow truck driver. When that didn't work, she turned on the waterworks. She walked up to me, clutching her stomach. "How could you be so cruel?" she whimpered. "I'm pregnant." The lineman stopped, looking super uncomfortable. "Wait, is she?" Mike asked. "Keep moving the gear, Mike," I said. "She's not pregnant." "How can you say that?" she wailed. "This is your child." "That's a bold move," I said, "considering I had a vasectomy 18 months ago. You know, the one you said you supported?" She went totally silent. She had completely forgotten. She was so self-absorbed, she hadn't even checked on me during the recovery back then. "So," I continued, "either this is a miracle, or you're carrying the architect's blueprints. Either way, it doesn't change the rent. Keep lying and I'll add it to the divorce papers as fraud." The entitlement finally cracked. She lunged at me, clawing at my face, and I had to hold her wrists until she stopped thrashing. She spent the next hour throwing her clothes into trash bags. The architect pulled up in his Rover, but he didn't even get out to help. He just popped the trunk. As she lugged her bags to the curb, Big Mike and his brother started blasting heavy metal in the living room, talking about their new garage gym. I walked out and tossed the roommate wanted sign at her feet. 2 halves. You might need this. I hear those Rovers are expensive to maintain. The divorce was a mess. Her lawyer tried to sue me for emotional distress and constructive eviction. We met for mediation, and she sat there playing the victim. "My client is traumatized," her lawyer said. "We want $50,000 and half the house equity." I didn't say a word. I just opened my laptop. "First," I said, "here's the paper trail showing the house is a non-marital asset. She hasn't put a dime into it. Second, here's the Ring camera footage from the hallway." I played a video of the sole architect pulling up to the house at 2 a.m. while I was at work. He didn't come in. A woman, not my wife, got out of the car, and they had a huge screaming match on my sidewalk about how he was broke and couldn't afford his lease because my wife wasn't bringing any money to the table anymore. Turns out, the guy was running a spiritual MLM scheme and was being investigated by the FTC. He was just a broke hustler looking for sugar mama. "I sent that footage to the other women he's living off of," I told the mediator. "One of them actually owns that Rover. She repossessed it yesterday. He's currently in Tulum with a new student he's scamming." My wife's face went gray. She walked away with nothing but her clothes and a $5,000 nuisance settlement I gave her just to sign the deed and leave forever. It didn't even cover her legal fees. I went back to my house. The lineman moved out after the season, and I moved my leather sofa back in. The house is quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. She wanted to see other people, and she finally saw the truth about the guy she chose over me. If you enjoyed seeing a soul architect get demolished by a logistics guy, hit that subscribe button. I promise my updates have a much higher frequency than his scams. Would you like me to share the story of how she tried to recenter herself by asking for her old room back 2 months later?